Good morning, Helsinki, and good morning, Kim.
Hi, Jean. We're back again. Unbelievable, huh? Yes.
Back again for our third day, but
Yeah.
also, unfortunately, our final day, no?
Yeah, we should have stayed here a week, right? and have award winners dinners like that, like yesterday. He was there at dinner last night to see the anti-stigma award, and you're already here. That's great. That's just perfect. Yeah, and this is a whole group. Who are you?
From Maastricht University.
From? Sorry.
Maastricht University.
Maastricht. Yes. Good. Very lovely city, right?
There's a very big delegation, I think, from Maastricht.
Yeah, big delegation. Yeah. And how are you guys?
I'm really good, enjoying the conference so far.
Really? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, great to hear.
So I think we could also have a Menti question up, because we really want to know something very important from you. So if you can use the Menti, scan the QR code, and let us know something very, very important.
How did you sleep?
And
exactly.
How did you sleep last night?
Yeah, so 1, no sleep, and 5, perfect. I didn't expect a full 5. Is it 5 or is it to 10?
It goes up to 10.
Oh,
so
sorry, 10
5 is not really a fantastic score. It just means that you had full of bright ideas, you were still buzzing about all the things you learned, all the people that you met. I think that's the only reason why you wouldn't have been able to sleep better than that.
Don't really know. Let's see a show of hands, okay? Who said, if you want to tell us, who said it's a 1? I had a bad, rough night. No, a 2? A 3 maybe? Yes, a 3? Not that good. Why not?
I had really cold feet.
Sorry?
I had really cold feet.
Oh, cold feet. That's not good. And you didn't have a blanket.
I put socks on in the end.
This is bad news, bad news. And a 4?
So we definitely need to start thinking about what we can do at the next conference, how
more
people can avoid
cold feet. Socks, things like that. And who had a 4? Like a night? Or a 5? Quite okay? No?
Anybody going for 10?
And 6? Oh yeah. Did anyone sleep like a 10 this night, last night? You did. How do you manage to do that at 10?
I don't know, it's probably genetic. I always do sleep like a 10.
Yeah, you always do, no matter what.
No problems with that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's good for health, right?
Yeah, work-life balance is okay in that way.
It all helps with everything. And you, Jean, how did you sleep?
Oh, I wouldn't go with the 10. The networking dinner I thought was really fantastic. The anti-stigma awards were so amazing. And I would say I was still buzzing a bit after that session, because it was such a nice session.
I think so too. And people keep talking to you all the time, right?
You could do, yes.
Before we go...
Also another question, actually, because we have a question again. What are the topics that you found particularly interesting? So was there anything that we already discussed in these past 3 days that you really thought were very stimulating, or something that you hadn't heard of before, something that you would like to hear more of?
Yes. I'm going to ask the lady in the pink, lovely suit. What are you entering?
Spot here. I really loved the quick fire round presentations yesterday from the young dementia researchers. I thought they were very good.
Yes, okay, nice to hear. Young dementia researchers. Anything else? We see living with dementia, behavioral science. Oh, there were so many. Air pollution.
Definitely have a lot of different topics coming up, like brain health, also intersectionality, so the 2 plenary sessions that we had. I can see LGBTQ. I have to say we had a fantastic session as well yesterday, which generated a lot of buzz also on Twitter.
Yes,
so it was really nice to see that.
What you are entering?
I'm just thinking about it. I think
Let's think a while.
LGBT is very interesting for me.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, we hear that a lot. Yeah, thank you so much. So that
I'd say that's a very busy brain cloud,
word
cloud. Because there's so many topics there, so it really means that everybody must have found at least 1 or 2 topics that you found very interesting and worthwhile. So we have air pollution, ethics, risk reduction, intellectual disability,
brain health,
the whole range of topics that we were able to discuss in the past days.
Support for young psychosocial intervention. Wonderful. We'll save this one, right? Because it's a rich word cloud.
That's definitely something to look back on and say, we were able to touch on a lot of really interesting topics.
Yes, yes, we can say that. But we still have a day to go. There was also, people were very active on social media. And this year, not only X, but also, this is X, right? Or
This
Twitter.
is
No, we decided to call it
X,
Twitter.
or formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah.
So
which
you can
is
see
more
the
friendly.
two.
Oh, look at that. Colorful. So what do you see? Who have we got? Oh, listen, not too quickly, because this is Instagram, right? This is
So we have the
Twitter.
two, yeah.
And people are there taking their group, and this is Instagram, also with the stories, and the welcome reception. Maybe the other one, please.
Again, the LGBTQ workshop,
The other slide,
which was
please.
very popular.
Yes, this
in
one.
both.
The reception in the city hall, and it's switching all the time. So people are active on Instagram as well. That would be very nice, because then we can just move a little to another.
I got a fantastic quote. Somebody said, after listening to the LGBTQ session, I cried. Everybody should be listening to the presentations of these brave and wonderful people. And I think that's a really nice feedback. And I think that the people that were in that workshop should be very proud of how they were able to provide really interesting information, but also stir our emotions.
Yes, and they said they wanted to come back next conference.
That also
and
sounds
be
good.
keynote speaker all day, right? Yes. All right. So, Jean, we are heading forward now to the session, and it's kind of an eclectic session. We found out, because it's about many different topics or opportunities, as we named them.
I think when we came here at the beginning, I mentioned that this was a conference that generated a lot of hope.
Yeah.
And then when we were looking at what are the kind of new perspectives, we found it quite difficult to narrow it down to one single topic.
Yep.
Because there's so many things that are going on in our field that are actually very positive. So rather than focusing on just one of these topics, we thought, why not have 4 fantastic presenters on 4 very different topics, but all topics that give us hope for the future.
Yes, and now before we start, I was just saying to you that people seem to agree on the areas where work needs to be done and where understanding needs to improve. But where would you say that this crowd disagrees on, maybe? What are the real discussions?
I think yesterday we had a session where we really agreed on the need to transform dementia care. People called for a revolution, because if we want to have person-centered care, we can't do it on a budget on a shoestring budget. So that's definitely something that people agreed on. When it comes to how we're going to transform the system even further, I think there are issues where we are discussing what is the role for new treatments, how quickly will these treatments become accessible, how will these be funded. So there's a lot of discussions currently in our field on that topic.
Who will
but
get
thankfully
it? Who will
we'll
pay
have
for
somebody
it?
talking about us.
Yes, who will pay for it, and what's the most effective way, things like that. That's the discussion. All right. Okay, let's talk about that and other topics, right? Will you introduce the first speaker?
So our very first speaker is Nicolas Villain. He is professor of neurology at the University of Sorbonne. And I did mention anti-amyloid treatments. So what he will be presenting on is what do we mean by efficacy and safety, and how do researchers, clinicians, and actually patients and carers think about that? Over to you, Nicolas.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Round of applause.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you to the organizer for this amazing congress. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for a great presentation, for the dinner, everything. So today I will talk about the hot topic, the new drugs, the anti-amyloid drugs, and we will talk about how to evaluate the efficacy and safety of this drug from 3 points of view: researcher, clinician, or patient. So first of all, since we will talk about drugs, I'll mention my disclosures. I must mention that I don't have any personal financial conflict of interest with Eisai or Lilly that we will mention later on. I don't have any strategic relationship with them. I'm not in any board or anything like that. Nonetheless, I am an investigator in a numerous clinical trial involving those 2 laboratories. So my hospital makes money with these drugs being tested in phase 3 trials, but I don't. So what are we talking about today? We are talking about anti-amyloid therapies. Anti-amyloid therapies are antibodies that bind to the amyloid beta that is within the plaques in the brain and clears them down to clean the amyloid PET scan that we can see here that is after 1 year of treatment of another drug that is fully clean. So lecanemab and donanemab have different targets, but they have the same result, amyloid PET clearance in the brain. And we will mention today only lecanemab and donanemab because they were this year the first one to publish a positive phase 3 clinical trials. Lecanemab earlier in January 2023 and donanemab last summer. So what are we talking about? We are talking about anti-amyloid therapies that were tested in early stages of Alzheimer's disease. What are early stages of Alzheimer's disease? It's MMSE 2230 for lecanemab, 2028 for donanemab. Both had confirmed AD pathology, different amyloid PET or CSF for lecanemab, amyloid PET and tau PET for donanemab. Individuals with comorbid cerebrovascular diseases were excluded. The trials were a bit slightly different. They both lasted 18 months, but lecanemab design was quite simple. Randomization was 1-to-1. Lecanemab was when given 10 milligrams kilo every 2 weeks for 18 months versus placebo. And the randomization strata involved clinical group, presence or absence of ongoing approved AD treatment, ApoE4 geographical region, whereas for donanemab, the strata involved the tau pathology assessed by tau PET, and the pre-specified primary analysis involved the low to medium subgroup, even if they also analyzed the high tau group. And the design was a bit different since everybody in the donanemab group received donanemab, but you could switch back to placebo if after a certain time your amyloid PET turned negative. So what are the results? The results are positive, so there is hope. The results are positive on every pre-specified primary and secondary endpoint in both lecanemab and donanemab trials. And to give you an example, on the CDR-SB scale that we will mention several times in this presentation, this is the placebo group in black, and the treatment group in green, so there is a significant effect. The difference at the end of the 18-month trial was 0.45 on this 18-point scale, which means 27% of relative difference between the two groups and 0.67 on the donanemab trial, which means a 36% relative difference between the two groups. Results were positive, but there were also side effects. Individuals experience ARIA for amyloid-related imaging abnormality, 21.5% versus 9.5% in the placebo group for the lecanemab trial, 36.8% versus 14.9% in the donanemab trial. ARIA are either edema or hemorrhage of the brain. Most of the time they are benign and asymptomatic, but sometimes they can also be serious. And serious ARIA occurred in 1.1% of patients in the lecanemab trials and in 1.3% of patients in the donanemab trials. And this serious ARIA can also have long-term sequelae, whose rate is currently unknown, and there were also deaths due to ARIA, 3 in the open-label extension of lecanemab and 3 in the core trial of donanemab. So this risk require an accurate assessment of risk-benefit ratio, since we've seen that there are risks, ARIA, but we could also add the treatment burden, since we have an infusion every 2 weeks or every month, a regular MRI to monitor ARIA, biomarker assessment, etc., etc. These treatments are not easy to implement, are not very comfortable, but they work. So we need to balance the benefits and the risk to see if the benefits outweigh the risk. So how to do that? We will start with the patient's perspective, of course. What do the patient want? The treatment-related outcome most important to patients with or at risk for AD and their care partners involve, I've listed here in this publication, on the top, improve or restore memory. All the green that I highlighted are the recovery of a function, yellow is the stabilization, and red is the slowing of a function. And when we look at the list, there is memory, there is also function, short-term memory, remember family, being independent, more focused, aware of self, etc., etc. So if we try to sum it up in 2 dimensions, we realize that for patients, the efficacy or the effectiveness of the treatment relies on a multiple dimension, and that this effectiveness first involves recovery of a function, second, stabilization, and if we can do better, slowing. So it looks like these drugs actually have an impact on these 3 highlighted points: slow AD production, help remain independent, and remove plaques. We'll see that now. Regarding these multiple dimensions that are important for a patient to tell, yes, this treatment is effective, what can we say? What were the scales used to test this efficacy? Look at the CDR-SB that I mentioned earlier, which was a primary endpoint in lecanemab trial and a secondary in donanemab trial. Yes, this scale, there was a significant effect, and yes, this scale involves this multiple dimension. You can see that there are 3 items that involve the function and 3 items that involve cognitive function. So 0.5 difference in this scale can mean, for example, that you can switch from a slight impairment in activities in your community affairs to be unable to function at all in this activity. So yes, a difference in this scale can be meaningful. In the lecanemab trial, they also use quality of life, caregiver burden, and activities of daily living scales, and that confirm the CDR-SB finding. On the other finding, yes, these drugs work on this quality of life, caregiver burden. They do have a significant statistical effect, so that's meaningful for a patient. Unfortunately, they can't recover, they cannot stabilize, they can only slow the progression of the disease. So it's on this element, it's not what patient would expect. Now let's switch to the physician perspective. Okay, I can tell myself, okay, I have a new drug, and this new drug works on top on what is already available, acetylcholinesterase inhibitors and memantine. As we can see here in this post-hoc analysis, whether you have memantine or acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, these drugs work in addition to that. So that's a new drug. Now let's have a look at the effect size. Yes, they work on meaningful items, but how do they work? Well, at the moment, they don't work a lot. We'll see that. The effect size is indeed similar to what we see in acetylcholinesterase inhibitors after 6 months in mild to moderate AD. These were these end of the 90s, 2000s trials where we tested acetylcholinesterase inhibitors in individuals with mild to moderate AD, and all the experts agree that these drugs have a modest effect. What was the effect on the CDR-SB? It was 0.5 point on the CDR-SB, which is very close to the 0.45 and 0.67 that we have here with these new drugs. If we look at statistics now, I'm sorry if I lose anybody in the room, but we have a standardized effect size metrics like the Cohen's d, and the Cohen's d is actually small when we look at the effect of this drug. It's 0.2 for lecanemab, 0.3 for donanemab. So we can see that at the end of the trial, there is still a large overlap between the individuals who were in the placebo group and individuals who were treated. So that's what we call a small effect size, and that was confirmed in the donanemab results, where we can see this large overlap between the placebo group and the donanemab group. This effect size is also below the minimal clinically important differences, which are the smallest difference in score in the domain of interest, which patients perceive as beneficial, and which mandate, in the absence of troublesome side effect and cost, a change in patients' management. And in the case of dementia research, due to anosognosia, unfortunately, this MCID, these minimal clinically important differences, were not used as a patient's perspective, but switched back to a physician's perspective. That's why I mentioned it here. So when we look at this MCID, what were the value we obtained in the literature? At least at 2 consecutive visits, a difference of 1 point in CDR-SB for participants with MCI, or 2 points in CDR-SB for participants with mild dementia. So again, the difference we observe here, 0.45, 0.67, is below these MCIDs. But you'll tell me, okay, these drugs were actually designed to be disease-modifying therapies, since they remove amyloid, which is a cause of Alzheimer's disease. So the difference we see here at the end of the 18 months where the MCID isn't met, may increase over time, then we will see that the MCID may be met a few months later and exceeded after that. So that could be a good thing. So will these benefits increase over time? And are these drugs actual disease-modifying therapy? Let's have a look at the global disease course of Alzheimer's disease. Here are the years since the positivity of amyloid PET, 0 to 20 years, and here is the CDR-SB scale, 0 to 18 points, 4 to 9 being mild dementia, 9 to 16 moderate dementia, and 16 to 18 severe dementia. What we observe in this trial is only a small 18-month time frame of Alzheimer's disease. We don't see the global course of the disease, of course. And the effect we observe here is a 0.45 point on this 18-point scale is only that. It's a small difference in this 18-month limited time frame. So the whole question is, will this effect keep growing with this drug, a disease-modifying therapy, and will it change the progression of the disease, which will mean a lot. 20-month difference in reaching the CDR-SB16, which means 29 months delay before you have severe dementia. That would mean a lot. The problem is we are not sure at the moment that this drug are actual disease-modifying therapy. This year we published with Vincent Planche in JAMA Neurology a paper where we discussed several arguments that tell you, okay, they were designed to be disease-modifying therapy, but actually what we are measuring may not be a disease-modifying effect, but simply a pseudo-symptomatic effect. We argue that based on a biological argument, the effect on biomarkers, and the response we observe on the clinical design. So in the end, it might not be this 29 months, but only a 6-month difference we have at the end. If these drugs work like a symptomatic treatment, they just work for 18 months, and that's the maximum effect we can see. Another perspective beyond the risk-benefit ratio is also to discuss the implementation complexity in the healthcare system and accessibility of this treatment. How can we treat all the patients? Well, it's going to be difficult, to be honest. Why? Because our colleague from the Karolinska Institute recently estimated that the eligible population in the EU for this drug is 5.4 million individuals, and the treatment cost would exceed 133 billion euro per year, which is over half of the total pharmaceutical expenditure in the EU. This pricing would, of course, be unsustainable and may further deepen the inequities across Europe. And beyond the treatment cost, it will change absolutely everything in our healthcare system. It's not like in oncology where we have a new drug and we already have a system to implement these new drugs. We already have infusion centers. We don't have in dementia, so we need to set them up. So we need a new diagnostic approach, more use of biomarkers to settle treatment monitoring procedure, the management of this serious area, the change in upstream and downstream patient care pathway, and of course, training and information for physicians and for patients. So how can we better evaluate anti-amyloid therapies in the future? That's here where after the physician, after the patient comes the researcher perspective. Well, we could move, that's what we suggest in our viewpoint this year, to an original clinical trial design to actually demonstrate disease modification. We cannot do a 10-year clinical trial, that's impossible, that's too much money, there will be too many bias, but we can use delayed start design that demonstrate disease modification, demonstrate that the effect will endure over time. So how does it work? It's a 2-stage clinical trial. In the first stage, you have a placebo and an active drug group. Oops, sorry, you have a placebo and active drug group. And in the stage 2, you have an active drug in both arms. What is a symptomatic effect? Is a symptomatic effect when you don't have any more difference between the early start group and the delayed start groups, whatever the starting of a treatment, so the disease progressed and it's a pure symptomatic effect. So whenever you started the treatment, you still have the same difference at the end of the trial. But you have a disease-modifying effect when the placebo, when the delayed start group starts the drugs but can never catch up with the early start group. And these delayed start trials are actually not very original. They have been used for decades in the Parkinson field and were tested, for example, last year in anti-amyloid, anti-synuclein therapies. Since these delayed start designs can have biases, we also need to demonstrate through a mediation analysis the effect of these drugs on biomarker to show that the effect on amyloid has an effect on tau and has an effect on neurodegeneration, which has an effect on cognition and function, which was proposed this year by Roche in this quantitative ATN model. Finally, the researcher perspective would also push us to move to the left, to move to preventive trial. And in this viewpoint, Matthias Jucker from Tübingen and Larry Walker proposed that we should move to the very first stages of the disease, since when we are at a symptomatic stage, we remove amyloid, we have a small difference in the trajectory. We should move to a stage where there is amyloid, but there is no sign of neurodegeneration. This would mean a pre-symptomatic immunoprevention. So that would be great. So we will need to prove that these drugs, like usual, are effective and safe. But since it will target a large part of the asymptomatic population, which is 3 times larger than the symptomatic amyloid-positive population, it will also need to be simple, acceptable, and accessible. So as take-home messages, I would like to highlight that amyloid therapies work for early Alzheimer's disease, and it's, of course, a new hope for patients. However, they can have serious side effects and complex implementation, so to comprehensively evaluate drug efficacy and balance risks, multiple perspectives and quantitative assessment are indispensable to provide a global perspective on disease course, and future anti-amyloid trials should better capture the long-term potential efficacy and risk, promote new design like delayed start design, and enhance simplicity and accessibility of treatment to reduce inequity. Thank you for your attention.
Yes. And of course, there's time for some questions or responses. And I was just wondering, how do you think? Oh, maybe you asked the question. Okay. So how do you think? Are countries prepared to maybe start with this new treatment, or to do all the research that you think is necessary still?
I think every country can start, but with a limited number of patients, with a highly selected subpopulation.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's very large figures. It will need more diagnostic facilities, more infusion facilities, more MRI available, etc., etc. So no healthcare system in the world is ready to deal with these patients.
Right.
So
just a few patients, and you think that every European country could do that?
Every, I'm not sure, but...
No. You hope.
Yeah, I hope we will, yeah.
So, yes, question. Please stand up if you have a question. If you do that in advance, people can go to you with a microphone. Yes.
Peter Kolominski-Rabas, I'm a neurologist and health economist from Germany. Thank you very much for your very balanced and critical presentation.
Yeah.
You showed that the new drugs are not better than what we have found for 25 years ago in the concerning clinical efficacy, and you show that the results of the WIMO group, that this will cost half of the European Arzneimittel budgets. So if we discuss good value for money, how you judge the clinical effectiveness and the price of 27,000
And can
US
I ask
price.
you how you evaluate that? Because
Yes,
I hear some
I
kind
mean,
of criticism.
yes,
Yeah.
because this drug is, if we take the US money, the drug is too expensive for the efficacy it shows.
All right. Okay, thank you for that clearness. Can you
Thank you for this very interesting question. So I didn't want to go on that field because that's beyond my field of expertise. I'm not an economist, I'm not a health economist, so clearly that's really not my job. I can try to answer with what I saw in the literature, like the US estimation using econometric indexes like QALY or EQI values, and all this value at the moment using the US price, as you mentioned, don't show that it's worth for money.
No.
Still, you know, this QALY is not a gold standard. It depends on your country, it depends on your state of mind, it depends on how are you ready to invest in research for innovation, at which cost, etc., etc. So I don't have a good answer for that, but I let that to regulators and people who make these decisions.
Yeah, I see. And you hope that costs will lower. Just go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation. It's a bit in line with the previous question, but how are the effects compared to, for example, psychosocial interventions or lifestyle changes?
Yes.
That's a very good question
general,
as well.
Yeah.
So
Do we need medication if we have that? Yeah.
So unfortunately, this kind of intervention has never been tested in such high-quality clinical trials, so it's very difficult to compare from these trials in social intervention and this kind of trial, which are much stronger or higher quality. But you have to know that these patients involved in this kind of trial were also involved in intervention. They just changed the drug. They did not change how patients were involved in this drug. So probably we see an effect on top of the social intervention. But from what I saw in the literature, which is very heterogeneous, but it's probably not, social intervention is probably not higher than when we see that.
Okay. We have another question
from my side, if I'm allowed.
Yes. Yeah, you first.
Because just a question, these drugs were tested in the field for people in early AD, which means people with mild Alzheimer's dementia, but also people with mild cognitive impairment.
Absolutely.
The argument that you make is that how they work compared to other treatments like acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, they're only available for people with mild Alzheimer's dementia. Mm-hmm. So is your value judgment slightly different for people with MCI compared to people with mild Alzheimer's dementia?
Mm-hmm.
It is not, because when we look at the post-hoc analysis and we look at the subgroups, we have different results. It looks like in the donanemab and the lecanemab trial that individuals with mild AD dementia might have a higher effect on these drugs. But for example, when we look at the aducanumab findings and the EMERGE trial that was positive, it's the opposite. So at the moment, it's unclear whether MCI or mild AD individuals better benefit of a drug, but what's sure is that both individuals benefit. So it's really on top of what exists.
But for one group, there are already existing treatments, and for the other group, at least in Europe, there are no treatments that are available for people with MCI.
That's an additional value. Yeah. That's a new drug for every group, and that's now a two-drug approach in the mild AD.
Okay, last question from the audience here. What's your name?
Nina Bossemus, and as a patient advocate, if your family member had Alzheimer's disease,
thank you.
Would you advise them to participate in a clinical trial with this drug, looking at the side effects?
Always a good question. Would you advise?
That's the best question ever. What should I do if my mother had Alzheimer's? Well, that's what I try to ask myself when I have to prescribe a drug, when it's difficult. So for the answer for clinical trial is clear-cut. Yes, of course, you should go into a clinical trial. Individuals are informed of the risk and everything, so that's for sure. Now, if these drugs were approved and if my mother had Alzheimer's, what would I do? Well, definitely I would screen for the exclusion criteria very accurately, and I would also check the ApoE status to see if she is at high risk of ARIA and everything, and then I will, of course, carefully check if the inclusion criteria are fulfilled to be sure that she can benefit the more, because, as you've seen, benefit and risk can be a bit balanced and questionable in this drug, so I would really prescribe it, but only in the case that I'm very sure that she will benefit the more and risk the less.
Exactly, so that's the way you should handle it with every patient. Okay, yes, thank you so much for your time. Jean, you want to say something? No? Thank you. That was wonderful. People were wondering about this a lot, weren't they, Jean?
So I hope that was a very instructive and somebody said a very balanced presentation.
Balanced presentation, that's what it was. Okay, so now I'm very happy to introduce a specialist nurse geriatric care, and you also call yourself a Sylvia nurse.
Yes.
To get you started, why Sylvia? Sylvia Holmes, Sylvia nurse, what does it mean?
It's actually from the Swedish queen, whose name is Sylvia, and she started a school for assistant nurses 27 years ago.
So she did that. Oh, she
teach
came
about
up
dementia
with that.
care.
Okay.
Yes.
Just checking. Can you hear her clearly, or maybe you should have your microphone a little up?
Is it okay?
Is it okay? That's okay. All right. She managed to get that microphone and get the microphone tangled into her lanyard, and then she untangled it herself. She's very energetic. She had a good night's sleep, I suppose. Yes, she always is happy. And of course, she's a team member of that Sylvia Hammett. That's the Sylvia Home, right? And an ambassador for Vision Zero. That's of the Swedish Dementia Center. So you have a typical approach, and you want to tell us all about it, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Please your attention for Ulrika Granér.
Good morning, everyone, and hyvää huomenta. My name is Ulrika, and I'm a specialist nurse in geriatrics and cognitive impairment care, and also a Sylvia nurse. I work for a foundation that's called Stiftelsen Sylviahemmet, but today I'm here as a representative for my colleagues at the Swedish Dementia Center, because I also, as you said, am a Vision Zero ambassador. And I was invited here to speak about the Vision Zero program that we have in Sweden. What if you had to get home from work to care for your children, but the door was locked? And when you tried to open it, someone came up to you and told you that you are not allowed to go outside. Would you calmly sit back and have a cup of coffee? Or if you worried sick about your missing wallet, and when you frantically look for it in your home, someone comes and says, you must drink a bitter juice to calm down. In a few minutes, you'd feel dizzy and tired and can no longer keep searching or express your worry. Would you feel safe and relaxed? This actually is what happens every day around the world to people with dementia. They are put under restraint or force for the purpose of keeping them safe, but I'm just going to have my pointer. Restraint actually causes harm in many ways, and it's not even recommended in dementia care. Despite this, a lot of different coercive measures are used today, at least in Sweden. And there are many types of restraint that can be used in dementia care. And basically, it's anything that is done to a person against their own will. So it could be holding a person down or standing in the way to keep them from moving, using bed rails to keep them in bed, locking the doors, using belts to keep them from standing up, using GPS trackers to see where they are all the time, motion sensor alarms, and so on, saying no, depriving people of choices, using sedatives to control unwanted behavior, hiding medicine in food, and so on. All of these measures are considered protective and legal measures if the person is aware that we are using them and is not objecting to these measures. But as soon as we do it without the person being aware or forcing them to do something, it is illegal. And there are many laws and constitutions that actually support us in not working with restraint. All of the documents you see here, the three first, state the same. Every human being is entitled to freedom of choice, and that these rights should be protected throughout life with no exception. Coercion and restrictions are contrary to the European Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms. And in Swedish constitution, we say that every citizen is protected against forced bodily intervention and deprivation of liberty. However, in the World Health Organization global report from 2021, they state that people with dementia, their carers and families worldwide continue to experience stigma, discrimination, and human rights violations. These include coercive or forced treatment or institutionalization, hard word, disregard for an individual's legal capacity to make decisions, and depriving a person of dignity and autonomy. And therefore, we needed to act on this matter. And as you can see, in Sweden, we known for quite a long time that we are not following the laws that we have. So from the 1980s up to the mid-2000, there was a lot of investigations going on, looking on what we do and what we actually should do. And in the late 90s, the National Board of Health and Welfare stated that a fundamental issue in the care of people with impaired decision-making capacity is how to ensure a safe care without violating their constitutionally protected rights and freedoms. And that legal protection for people with impaired decision-making capacity needed to be strengthened, and that the legislation did not provide the staff with sufficient guidance for their actions. So then, in 2009, the Swedish government gave a mission to the Swedish Dementia Center to look into this matter. And a few years later, the first report came, which was named For Whose Sake? About restraint and protection in dementia care. And that was sort of the start of building the Vision Zero program, which was launched in 2015. And I'm soon going to tell you what it is. In 3 years then, there was a lot of Vision Zero ambassador training going on, where representatives from the Swedish Dementia Center and from the Quality Registry of Swedish Dementia Registry came and taught people about Vision Zero with the aim to spread knowledge wider in Sweden. And now, last year, we had more than 60,000 people going through the e-learning program, which is 20% of all the nurses, aides, and assistant nurses working in care in Sweden. So that's a fantastic number, but it needs to be higher. So we're hoping that in the future, this number will be higher. And with the new STAR-branded program that Ann-Christine was talking about yesterday, we are having more participants in the program. And hopefully, this will lead to less restraint in dementia care. So with all that said, we still need to move forward. We see it as a four-way process where you have to work on all four parts. To work preventive against restraint, all staff needs knowledge about dementia, about common symptoms, and how to work person-centered. So all of the program is based on the person-centered care view. And here, of course, the online training program is the first step to raise knowledge. And then we need working methods. And the Vision Zero material includes checklists for assessments of symptoms and how to work with a person's life story as a tool for person-centeredness, and a lot of practical advice on how to use person-centered communication to alleviate and prevent symptoms. And then it also includes strategies, structured tools for strategic teamwork when there is a risk of harm, and how to act if there is no option left but to use restraint, how to work with documentation and safety routines, and so on. And then number 4, which I think is the utmost important point of all of this, is that we need clear leadership. It's crucial to support the team in preventing coercion and restraint in care. And the material includes guidance to leaders on how to raise knowledge about restraint, how to create a strategy for the Vision Zero in the facility, and what laws apply to Swedish dementia care. So what my colleagues did is that they created a toolbox, you could say. First of all, we have this Vision Zero handbook, and it comes in both Swedish and English. And I do have a few copies with me today. I don't want to bring them home again. And it's quite a massive handbook, and it really is a tool because it's not just text. It's structured tools for all of these, how to assess symptoms and how to work. So the staff guidebook has 4 chapters. Number 1, what is restraint and what can it lead to? What does the law say? Number 2 is preventive working methods and actually concrete advice on this. Number 3 is strategies for communication and person-centered care when difficult situations arise in care. And number 4 is about leadership and creating a workplace policy. And then we also have a very short handbook for informal carers, which is only 12 pages, and it's to explain why do we not use restraint? Why don't we lock the door if my mother wants to run away from her home? It's unfortunately only in Swedish. The QR code will lead you to the webpage where you can see the English material that the Swedish Dementia Center has. But then we can never just stop with a book because everybody doesn't like reading books. So we also have a digital application, and this one is free and it's available for any type of Apple or Android device. And it comes in both Swedish and English. But you have to search for it in Swedish and then swap the language in the app. And it also comes in 2 versions, one for staff and one for informal carers. And as you can see, it has 4 chapters with examples of difficult situations and how we could handle them and what laws apply to how we work. I know there's been some trouble downloading it sometimes, but eventually you will make it. And then we also have an e-learning program, which is only in Swedish right now. And it's only about 20 minutes, and it's got a lot of concrete examples on difficult situations and how to work person-centered. Do I have time? Okay. So why should we be using the Vision Zero program? Well, first of all, it gets the team to work more person-centered, which is really necessary, as we've heard these days. But we can also see that we get a more safe care. We work to prevent harm from restraint, and we are actually compliant with current laws. And we can also see that self-determination, when being supported, enhances self-esteem and dignity. To choose for oneself and being validated as a worthy adult person strengthens a person's self-respect, self-esteem, and dignity. What we also see is that there is a reduction of behavioral and psychological symptoms in dementia when working person-centered, so then we don't have to use restraint. But then, of course, there are some barriers that we have to work on to implement this. And there's a lot of attitudes that you've heard these days, that people with dementia should be protected from themselves and so on. So we need to work with an attitude shift to enhance the thought that all people are equal, no matter what. And this attitude is often due to a lack of understanding and knowledge. So if we work on the lack of knowledge, both in staff, in management, but also in society, it will be easier to implement. And then, of course, the constant question of resources, in time, in staffing, financial resources. But I would say the main barrier is the lack of leadership. And this is also proven in research, that this is the most described barrier in implementation of a care without restraint. And that was it. Thank you.
So, Ulrika, will you give away one of these books, or do they have to buy it? Or can we give it away for a good question?
We can give it away for a good question.
Yeah, right.
Can't we?
Jean is not competing, but he will ask you the first question, okay? There you go, yeah.
And of course you should have
Jean
one.
first, and then
also the first question I had, and I think you almost gave the answer already. I'm a care provider, and I find your vision of zero vision absolutely fascinating. I'm concerned about my staff, Do I need more staff? Do I need to train my staff better? What are my resources that I would need to implement such a vision?
I have an example. I used to work in the community as a dementia specialist and leading staff in this. And we took away the locks of the doors of the unit, and they said, well, everyone will run outside and be missing forever.
Exactly, yes. I would think that they would say that. Yeah.
And that's what this is about, that you have to do, you have to plan ahead and think who is at risk of running away, and then make a plan. So at first, we had one extra staff, but after just a few weeks, they noticed that people got calmer because we were working preventive. So at the end of this, we had a trial for 6 months, and after 6 months, they actually had one less staff as a standard.
Wow.
Yes, because they noticed that the more staff, the more confusion and worry they were causing in the unit.
That's interesting.
So sometimes you need more staff, and sometimes you don't.
Yeah. That's really interesting, isn't it? So we have the Purple Brigade here. So what is that? Because you have a question, but who are you in the purple sweaters?
I'm Ruth McCabe, and I'm with a peer support group for people with dementia and their family and friends called STAND. So we're based in Fife in Scotland. So I have Audrey with me here, who's living with dementia, and Jerry, who's not quite here yet. He's not got out of his bed. And Stuart and Pat and I are all helpers. So we run things like meeting centre spaces in Fife in Scotland.
Nice.
But my question is, your resource sounds absolutely magical, but have you done any work with the people with dementia to help them to actually understand their rights?
Nice.
But personally I have, and I know that the Swedish Dementia Centre colleagues also do a lot of work for people with dementia, because you are the most important people.
It's all about you.
But I think there is a lack of understanding, as you told us on Monday, that we need to work with people and not for people. So we have to have that shift of mind, and we're not there yet in Sweden, but we are on our way.
Thank you.
Do you think that you have been informed on your rights properly?
Well, I guess Audrey's maybe the one to answer that.
No.
I mean, I suppose what we find in Scotland is that people do what they have to do to keep people as safe as possible, but what I would want to do is have that conversation with Audrey when she's able to understand. So Audrey has a tag on her phone that her family know where she is. She lives alone with her wee dog, and she's absolutely fine. But there may come a time where that's not the case, and it's what you put in place. So we try to have these conversations early, so we know what people will accept and what they won't accept. But we're lucky that we have people that are at that stage.
Yes,
it's probably very important, huh?
And as I said, it's not illegal if the person is actually with us on this one. Because I think GPS trackers are amazing when they're used in the right way.
Absolutely.
But there is also a risk with the GDPR and everything that we track people who don't want to be tracked. And I have the right to sleep in a garden if I want to. But because I don't have dementia, nobody tells me I can't.
Right.
Absolutely. So thank you.
Exactly. So you think that she might have one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
I will give you one. Do you want to hand it over yourself later on? Oh, I will. The vision zero. Yeah.
And just a final anecdote, because I met Ulrika in Sweden at a conference where she was speaking. I was already then very convinced about the fantastic work that they were doing. I was talking to the ethics committee of the Luxembourg Alzheimer's organization, and they were very interested in that, and they're really trying to implement that Vision Zero also within their organization now. So I think that's a fantastic result of the great work that you're doing.
I did a search on Google, and there are actually some European countries that have similar programs. I don't remember which ones right now, but there are a few, so we're not the only ones.
Sure. Okay. Thank you
very much. And it's my turn to present the next speaker. So somebody from Finland, we have Eino Solje. He is a professor at the University of Eastern Finland in Kuopio. And he has dedicated his research life to other types of dementia, and we'll hear from him today about frontotemporal degeneration and also about Lewy body dementia. Eino, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the kind invitation and introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues and dear friends, I want to express my deepest gratitude for the kind invitation to speak in this quite fascinating session. This is a great honor for me indeed. And by way of introduction, I'm currently directing University of Eastern Finland Brain Research Unit dedicated for clinical trials and academic trials. And I'm also leading frontotemporal lobar degeneration and early onset dementia research group. Furthermore, I work as a physician responsible for neurodegeneration outpatient clinics in the Kuopio University Hospital, where we meet patients under 70 years of age. Thank you for the opportunity to share my insight and experiences with all of you today. And this is the tricky part, how to change the slide. Upper, here, yeah, okay, I managed. So here you can review my disclosures. If there is a person with apparently metastatic, non-curable cancer, ethical considerations make us in healthcare to explore precise histopathological and molecular diagnosis while the patient is still alive. This not only aids in confirming the condition, but also set the groundwork for personalized treatment strategies. Conversely, in the scope of dementia, many healthcare centers do not view a comprehensive diagnosis as a priority, despite the important potential for improving patient care, and outcomes with such information. This discrepancy represents a form of structural discrimination against individuals living with dementia. Furthermore, it's worth noting that for conditions like cancer, there are no prominent public awareness campaigns such as the Pink Ribbon campaign for breast cancer in Finland, designed to raise awareness and support. Unfortunately, in the field of dementia, we do not see this kind of public ribbon campaigns or other types of highly visible support initiatives. If we want to find a cure for these disorders, we need to be together willing to learn to diagnose these disorders. We must prioritize the importance of accurate diagnosis for dementia, just as we do for other diseases. And we have to work diligently to eliminate the additional stigmatization that often surrounds cognition-affecting conditions. Only through such collective efforts we can overcome these challenges, provide the best possible care and support for those affected by these disorders, and ultimately do scientific breakthrough discoveries. In this presentation, I will cover briefly 3 distinct topics. First, why is the better diagnostics essential for trials leading eventually to disease-modifying drugs? In the second part, I'll go through why the accurate diagnosis is needed already now. In the last part, I will shortly describe an overview of current management options for dementia with Lewy body, i.e. DLB, and frontotemporal dementia, i.e. FTD. Dementia is not only Alzheimer's. Especially the dementia with early onset is a lot more than Alzheimer's. DLB, characterized by Parkinsonian type movement syndrome, fluctuation in attention, depression, apathy, REM sleep disturbances, autonomic nervous symptoms, visual hallucinations, in addition to the cognitive symptoms, causes at least 10% of all forms of dementia. Frontotemporal dementia, FTD, is another substantial contributor to the overall prevalence of dementia, representing at least 10% of cases. And if we speak of early onset dementia, the number is much higher. Someone says even 30, 40, 50% of the cases in population under 60 years of age. What's noteworthy about FTD is that in at least 50% of the cases, the disease shows autosomal familiar pattern of inheritance. It is somewhat confusing that in Finnish language, FTD is referred to as memory disorder, when in reality, memory symptoms are actually very rarely present in the early phases of this disease. Instead, behavioral alterations, impulsivity, apathy, disinhibition, loss of sympathy or empathy, hyperorality, and impaired executive functions are the primary signs and symptoms that define this disease. DLB and FTD share some common features. No specific biomarkers are available, and the diagnostic avenue is long. Still almost 4 years, even in the specialized centers in FTD, and also several years in dementia with Lewy bodies, DLB. It is important to recognize that no meaningful clinical drug trials can be designed without an early and precise diagnosis. Moreover, understanding the underlying mechanism and developing new diagnostic tools require accurately validated biomarkers. Furthermore, we urgently require more sensitive and specific diagnostic instruments tailored for early phases of the disorders and for forecasting the progression. Precise tools are needed also to avoid setting a diagnosis of DLB or FTD for someone who eventually won't have a progressive dementia-leading disease. The question of precision diagnostics is hence extremely ethical. Despite the recent advancements of the diagnostics and improved general knowledge on these diseases, the diagnostics has remained challenging, even within specialized centers. Yet, from 20 up to 30% of the diagnosis of DLB and FTD have set without actual corresponding neuropathology. It is important to note that this issue isn't exclusive to DLB and FTD. Even in Alzheimer's disease, we encounter diagnostic challenges with similar prevalence. So there remains a lot to do for us. Nevertheless, the future seems brighter. New diagnostic tools are emerging. Already now in specialized centers, automated digital applications to analyze MRI images of the patients are available. In future, maybe all gathered clinical decision-making data points will be put into artificial intelligence applications, and the diagnostic decision-making process could be improved only by that, with all the tools and symptoms data collection that we do already now, even without any new fluid or imaging biomarkers. Still, it is great that also new feasible blood-based markers, especially to distinguish between primary psychiatric disorders and FTD or DLB, are upcoming. For example, neurofilament light chain from blood is already available in many countries, including Finland, for this diagnostic setup. Genetics is coming to routine clinical decision-making. Genetics isn't ethically easy chapter. We know it might cause burden for next generation, but we know also that especially in the case of FTD, quicker avenues and even shortcuts to definite diagnosis can be gained. Molecular level disease mechanisms are being discovered. This opens new doors for development of diagnostic methods as well as treatment targets. Not to forget, new cerebrospinal fluid analyzing techniques are emerging. These include, for instance, seed amplification assays, assay methods to pinpoint underlying accumulating protein, as if indicating neuropathology ex vivo. Importantly, all the steps to distinguish between Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia will lead also to improved diagnostics of DLB and FTD. Now let's shift into the significance of accurate diagnosis in today's medical care. The cornerstone of management of these diseases lies in the diagnosis, and practical concerns associated with this, of course, is the selection of appropriate medications. There are several examples underlying the need for accurate diagnosis. For instance, Alzheimer's drugs are beneficial often in Alzheimer's disease, as we heard a few minutes ago, but also in dementia with Lewy bodies. In FTD, these might, however, even lead to loss of the control of the symptoms and hence should be avoided. Antipsychotic medications might be drug of choice in Alzheimer's disease-related psychosis, but can lead to severe motor symptoms in dementia with Lewy bodies. Occasional use of benzodiazepines might be justified in Alzheimer's disease, occasionally, not all the time, but occasionally, but may lead to paradoxal excitatory incidents in FTD due to different underlying neurotransmitter system architecture. Also, differentiation between Parkinson's disease and dementia with Lewy bodies is essential. For example, dopamine receptor agonists may be good in Parkinson's disease, but often harmful in dementia with Lewy bodies. But despite that, in my view, the key issue is still psychoeducation rather than pharmacological symptomatic treatments. If the patient, family, and care personnel know what are typical symptoms and the disease and what can be expected, the management can be designed accordingly, and the disease, including its symptoms, can be accepted more easily for the patient and for his or her next of kin. Now I will briefly touch upon the current options available for managing FTD and DLB. Even though there are no disease-modifying drugs available, a lot can be done. Pharmacological approaches in frontotemporal dementia include serotonin metabolism affecting drugs, certain antipsychotic pharmaceuticals, and, for instance, valproic acid. In dementia with Lewy bodies, acetylcholinesterol inhibitors can be used for cognitive and neuropsychiatric symptoms, as well as levodopa for motor symptoms. Also, general symptomatic medicines, such as melatonin for sleep rhythm disturbances, and, for example, constipation pharmaceuticals, should be used when needed. In addition to the chances for pharmacological management strategies, a lot can be done without pharmaceuticals. The cornerstone of management of especially frontotemporal dementia is actually everything else than pharmaceuticals currently. These include education of care personnel to manage neuropsychiatric symptoms. You maybe know that in the most appreciated meta-analysis, the best method for management of neuropsychiatric symptoms is actually the education of care personnel, as we actually heard very good example in the last presentation. Psychoeducation of patients and their families is very important and the cornerstone of management of these disorders. It is important to have good care of other disorders. For example, in FTD, it won't exclude the possibility to have depression. Quite contrary, actually. FTD raises the likelihood of getting psychiatric comorbidity, and psychiatric comorbidity should be taken care as we do in other people. Malnutrition should be detected and managed, and sleep rhythm and physical activity should be taken care of. The disease should be regularly followed up, and the future management options should be planned beforehand, not in as quite often it happens in the clinics in ER, that in Friday before the Christmas, at Friday at 6 p.m. there happens something, and then we have to make a plan what to do now. So these plans should be taken and planned very well beforehand. Social security benefits needs to be assessed regularly, and not to forget assessment of mental capacity for legal decisions and assessment of ability to drive car. And now to my last slides. One important issue is that the stigma in these disorders can be reduced only with active communication, outreach activities to patients, families, society, up-to-date training of healthcare personnel, and improving and accelerating our diagnostic avenues. The society and healthcare organizations need to change attitude towards aged people and persons with dementia, and accurate diagnosis should be seen as if human right. This is the way to find eventually cure for these diseases. So, summary for the better future. An accurate diagnosis is essential to get better future for the individuals having DLB or FTD. Accurate diagnosis is a key for correct management of these diseases already now. Especially the sharing of scientifically proved information of these diseases for healthcare professional, third sector, and general public will lead to shorter roads to the diagnosis and reduce the stigma. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Eino. And also a very quick question from my side. I think in the first speech we heard about hope for new treatments in the field of Alzheimer's disease. How hopeful would you be for new treatments, and how soon would you expect those to come for other types of dementia?
Well, I think that in frontotemporal dementia, especially in the genetic forms, as even half of the patients are having some genetic or infamiliar pattern, genetic pattern in their disease. I think that if there is only one single mutation leading to the disease, it should be easier to find cure for these diseases, to make silent one repeat expansion or something like that. But in the case of Lewy body dementia, it's more challenging because we know that the diagnostics is not very easy. And in many cases, or even in the most of the cases, we know definite diagnosis only after the death. So develop meaningful clinical trials in dementia with Lewy bodies we need more, we need better biomarkers for that, I think.
Thank you very much, Eino.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you for your time. All right. Oh, yeah, but we were. Okay. One quick question, okay? Question fire style. One sentence question, one sentence answer, yes?
The diagnosis of Lewy bodies can be diagnosed very accurately from a DAT scan. And the DAT scan is 85 to 95% successful. The problem is every country doesn't have it. We are lucky enough to have it in Ireland, and that is how I was diagnosed. There was traces in the lumbar puncture, there was traces in the PET scan, but the DAT scan, according to Professor Ian McKeith anyway, in University of Newcastle, is 85 to 95% successful.
Yes.
That's very successful.
You know about that?
I think we do DAT scan for everyone who has experimental symptoms. We do gene panels for everyone if they wish and they are below certain age. We do neuropsychological assessment for everyone. And I honestly don't think that the specificity is so high with DAT scan. The differentiation between vascular extrapyramidal diseases, differentiation between atypical forms of Parkinson's disease, differentiation between Parkinson's disease and dementia with Lewy bodies. Of course, it's very needed, the DAT scan, and we should have more facilities around the world. But in the clinical setting, with all the tests available, we do not get so good numbers in the differentiation with that scan. But I agree that it's very essential in the diagnostics, and it helps a lot.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that elaboration. Thank you. Round of applause. Wonderful to know about the different types. So before we go to the last speaker of this morning, a different kind of question for you. Can I ask you to think about, you might be surprised, maybe not, think about love. Ah, you see the faces changing, okay? Maybe they feel love now. Now my question to you is, when you think of love or when you feel love, what would you say helps to give love? Think about that. What helps to give love? What's the first thing that comes up to mind?
Communication.
Communication, nice one. One word answers. Can you just tell me, just say them out loud. What helps to give love? Touch, good one. Anything else? What? Trust? Trust, good one. Money? Did he say money? Of course, why not? Anything else that might help give love? Patience, love that one. Smiles? Yeah, smiles and? Good relations, yes, of course. Anything else that might help to give love? Support. Yes, support to give love, exactly, yeah. Well, why I came up with this question, because I really love the title of our next speaker's talk, and it's Improving the Lives of People with Dementia Through Technology. We didn't hear this one yet, right? But I think that this person claims that technology might help, right? He's talking to somebody else now, but we're talking about your presentation, Mr. Orrell. Were you paying attention? We've been talking about your presentation all the time. Did you hear the question about love and what could help love? Yeah.
I'm still thinking about love.
You think, oh, he's just distracted by love. That's good. But improving the lives of people with dementia through technology. So that's quite interesting. And he's the director of the Institute of Mental Health. That's a partnership between the university and the NHS Foundation Trust in Nottingham. There he's from. He's still looking at his phone. I'm curious. What are you looking for?
It's time.
Oh, you have a time setter yourself. Okay, good. So he will have his 15 minutes. Okay, Mr. Orrell, would you please take the stage? All right. Technology to support love. And technology to support your own timekeeping.
Thanks very much. I'm trying to stop thinking about love, but I know my brother said to me, what you need in life is someone to love, something to do, and something to look forward to. And I think that's pretty good. So I'd like to start by thanking very much Alzheimer Europe for inviting me. It's an honor and a privilege to be here, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk about technology and dementia. So firstly, I'd like to say apologies I've not got all the logos up here for the wonderful partners we've worked with on the two consortium for Distinct and Induct. And but particularly I'd like to thank the European Working Group for People with Dementia. And I think it's very timely to be thinking about technology. So I'd also like to thank very much the lovely European Union, who gave us these two large grants with the equivalent of 30 PhD students across about 10 countries in Europe over 6 years. And we've been able to do some really amazing work with technology and dementia care. And also, there's a timer on there, you see, I didn't need it on my phone. And also, to be able to bring it together in some best practice guidelines. And after this session, there's actually a session at 10:30 on the Distinct and Induct projects run by the early career researchers themselves. So look forward to that. If you'd like to hear more about the individual projects, please do go to that. It's in room 102. So part of the characteristics of these training programs was to train the early career researchers of the future and to develop them. And we were lucky to work with the Interdem Academy, and they had summer schools in various parts of Europe. And this was the one in May 2022. We just got out of COVID, and in Zamora in Spain. It's a fantastic opportunity to network, as is the time now, and to think about the value of technology and the balance of technology in our lives. So technology technology is here to stay, really. Around 80% of households with one adult age 65 and over have internet connection in the UK. And in the 7 years from 2013 to 2020, internet use doubled in the over 75. So you can imagine that it's gone up even further since then. And it's the most highly used and valued source of information for people with dementia and caregivers. And actually, COVID-19 has accelerated people's use of technology. We've had things like online Zoom meetings. We've had online cognitive stimulation therapy. There have been online singing groups. So in addition to COVID, we're seeing a cohort effect of a new generation of people getting dementia who've been using technology for the last 10 or 15 years. So it's, like I said, it's here to stay, but there are concerns for people who don't have access to technology or don't have access to the right technology, and people who get excluded by the technology itself, which is meant to empower you. The Interdem Technology Task Force highlighted the need for high-quality studies on usability and effectiveness, and also to involve people with dementia and family carers all the way through, from the beginning, from the very ideas, to actually putting it into practice. So technology can help people's independence and autonomy. But we've got a poor understanding of how people use technology in their everyday lives. And what we find, actually, quite often is that people are repurposing existing technology, like they use their phones for reminders, they use their phones to keep notes and things like that. They don't always want something new. And so things can actually be designed, and I know scientists are fond of gadgets, they're fond of the new special new monitoring system or the special new this or that. But we've got to think about what people want to use and what they will like and what they will find helpful. So this brings us to, I guess, the dimension between technology for empowerment or technology that's perhaps a bit stigmatizing. And I've heard the stories of older people who've been offered a pendant with a button to press for an alarm if they fall over or something like that. And they don't want to wear it because it's stigmatizing, it looks bad, it's not very nice to look at. On the other hand, if you think of something like a Fitbit or a watch, you know, the latest technology, the modern, up-to-date things, actually people might be more inclined to have something like that because it's a practical, it's a useful thing for themselves. But when they wear it, they feel modern. They don't feel, dependent and like they're having to wear something which says, look, I'm not able to do stuff. So also when we develop apps for technology, kind of apps for brain training or things like that, what are we actually doing? We developed an app for looking at independence and dementia, and somebody used the term homework, and it's like, oh, well, what do you think of as homework? You think of school, something you've got to do, maybe it's not always that fun. So we've got to get this balance around what actually works for people and what people want to use. And in the same way, and I'm thinking about the human rights aspect, some of the safety or surveillance systems for monitoring people are actually, this kind of marketing they use is the same way for marketing for, keeping an eye on your children or keeping an eye on your pets. And that's quite stigmatizing. I wouldn't want to be kind of monitored all the time, which room I'm in, what am I doing? So we've got to think about what's the minimal thing that we can use to help people manage and that empowers them. Also, if you're looking at things like things for security, I mean, people have PIN numbers to make sure their money's safe when they try and take it out of the bank. But of course, if somebody's a bit forgetful, are they going to forget how to go and get the money out of the bank? Are they going to ask somebody to read out their PIN number? So there's in some way that's empowering and it's safer for your money, but in other ways, it's makes you more vulnerable. And in terms of kind of robots and the purpose of robots, what we found in some of the work is that people don't look on a kind of animal robot as a pet, but they look on it as more like a doll, kind of a helpful doll. And one of the things they did say was, well, if we're going to have like this animal robot, we'd rather have like a cat or a dog or something that's familiar, because, I mean, it's not that people go down to a pet shop and the pet shop says, what would you like, a hamster, a cat, a rabbit, or a seal? Because actually, it's not something you'd ordinarily have around flipping around the house eating fish. So, so the other thing is around brain training. Is it something that's empowering, or is this idea, if you're not doing brain training, are you doing successful aging? Is there some kind of stigma that, well, you ought to be looking after your brain, things like that? So on the one hand, it's empowering. On the other hand, perhaps it's a bit stigmatizing and you feel guilty, oh, I should have done my brain training today. So the Induct program is about innovative training for dementia care, and it had three main objectives: to look at the practical, the cognitive and social factors to improve usability, to look at the effectiveness of specific types of technology, and to get an insight into the barriers of implementation and technology in dementia care. And we looked at technology to support everyday life, so things like phones and things you might use around the house, technology to help meaningful activities, which might be technology apps or kind of exercise technology, and also healthcare technology, which could be kind of systems to help support people in nursing homes. And so Frans Verheij has led our technology training program in the Interdem Academy, but Rosemary Droz, who is not able to make the conference this time, Rosemary Droz led the development of our best practice guidance, which I'm going to come on to. So now, if this is a what's called a logic model for understanding how the purpose of technology relates to what the outcomes you're going to get. So you can see here that you have a lack of meaningful activities. This is to do with social robots in dementia care, and things to kind of help reduce problems with stigma in your social network, and thinking how social robots might help with communication, and with people finding them friendly and useful, and also ideas around what they're needed for adoption. And the idea behind this was perhaps if people find something friendly, it's a good talking point, perhaps that'll help their social health. And this was to do with the photoscape thing, like a photo album that people can use for reminiscence, and a practical tool for discussion and reminiscence in dementia care. And that was, again, with Josephine Tan and Rosemary Droz's team. So with the best practice guidance, we've got recommendations from the 15 Induct and also now the 15 distinct projects, looking at how it can be presented in a practical and attractive and accessible way. And it's interactive website, so actually you can go there, and whether you're a healthcare commissioner or a practitioner, whether you're a person with dementia or family carer, you can look at the site in different ways and find things that relate to certain aspects of technology. Rosemary's done a wonderful job putting it together and got all the early career researchers to be involved in that. And the idea is also it'll stimulate further practice and research. You can see this is how it's laid out. And there's a navigation page. You can search the recommendations themselves. And I do encourage you to go to this. It now includes the dementia, the distinct guidance as well. You can search for particular things you're looking for and the recommendations. You can look at the group that you're from, like whether you're a technology developer or researcher, somebody who's a user or policymaker. And then you can look at specific recommendations to do with particular areas. And you can see there's these are recommendations around practical and cognitive aspects, and it's all carefully curated and carefully organized. And this is one thing about products for people with dementia and carers to avoid stigmatizing stereotypes. You get a piece of guidance, an example of the kind of evidence underneath it, and some advice about what to look for and how to move forward. This is another reference about people with dementia working with occupational therapists with everyday technology. You can see how there's how people with cognitive impairment might have more issues with using technology, but there's some tips there about how best to work with them. And there's also other work on using computer tablets. And there's read more pages if you'd like to have more information overall. So last year, we're very pleased that some of our early career researchers won the most influential tweeter award. And we had a symposium on distinct, and now we've got a summary symposium coming up at 10:30, as I said, on distinct and induct. And we're very grateful to be here and be able to present our work, and especially the work which has been collaborative with so many people. So the best practice guidance tells you about the scientific relevance of the work, the clinical relevance in terms of the recommendations, and also the relevance to society to make more user-friendly and useful and implementational technology for a more dementia-friendly society. So to summarize, dementia is a force, to summarize, technology is a force for good. It's certainly here to stay. We need to look at things that are enabling and empowering rather than things that just add stigma and make things more difficult. And it's not to replace humans, but it's hopefully some way to help people manage better and provide something that addresses a range of social health issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. Yes, before you go, can you please answer a question on your mentee? We have a question for you as well. Answer a question on your mentee, because after this morning, we're very curious to find out what gives you the greatest hope. And Jean, is there an option to pick more, or can you only pick one?
Unfortunately, these are the options that you've been given. But maybe afterwards you can find out if there's something missing from this list. Do let us know.
But can they pick more than one?
Yes, they can pick more than one.
You can vote for more.
Yes.
So please tell us about your biggest hope, and maybe you have a question for Martin. Jean.
Yes. So, yeah.
He's voting too. We'll see. We'll talk about the results later. Yeah, go.
Just a quick question to you, because I think it's a fascinating presentation. Also, the project that you're involved in are absolutely amazing. Great to have them presented here at our conferences. What would be a country where these kind of assistive technologies are really used the most? Are there models?
Model country.
Well, I've not made a comparison. But I think, I think we're used to the idea of perhaps using them more in, I guess, in Europe and North America and Japan and places like that. But actually, the many countries across the world where technology has already become a part of everyday life. And for example, after the tsunami, President Clinton was working with the fishermen in Malaysia and trying to help them get their living back again. And they said, well, what's the issue? He said, well, we can't tell the price of fish every day so we don't know how much money we're going to make for when we sell the fish. And actually, they gave them mobile phones, and the mobile phones enable them to get a better price for their fish, to get better, to make more money for their family and things like that.
And in the field of dementia care? Where would be the country where these kind of technologies are really being used the most?
I think the Netherlands is particularly advanced in terms of dementia care research and technology. Yeah. Thank you. That was for Kim, by the way. But I think we mustn't underestimate countries, because people are making the most of technology where they can and repurposing, phones that might be used for one thing, they'll use them for another thing as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thanks so much.
Quick question, what gives you the most hope? And you can't pick assistive technologies.
Which one?
I guess I'd probably say probably brain health initiatives. It's a big one.
And there's one thing more, because you entered your choice, but we didn't give you the option to choose for the Vision Zero approach by Ulrika, like the Vision Zero, no restraint, remember, this morning. So if you feel like that could be a great hope as well, raise your hand, please. Yes, look around, Ulrika. You got many, many supporters. Yes, yeah, and 2 hands. Yes, okay, that deserves a round of applause. So thank you so much, Martin, Orrell, and thank you, Jean.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We'll see you this afternoon for the closing ceremony.